Next weekend, we'll be taking special offering and commitments to take care of some important needs here at our church. When I first shared with you, we were $375,000 from paying off all our land and buildings here at the North Little Rock campus. You're already generously responding, so we've paid off another $77,000, new amounts $297, so that's pretty awesome. Thank you. We're going to renovate this room, including fixing the floor, so it's safer and easier for the elderly and the disabled to navigate. There's a lot of excitement about this from people in wheelchairs, people who use walkers, everyone who struggles to sit or stand on the strange slopes on this floor. Fixing it is going to be a hilarious mess. We're not going to close for a Sunday. They're going to, in between Sundays, it's going to be hysterical, but we got a good plan. It's coming later this spring or early summer, and we're building a new play area for our kids in the MAC that's going to be awesome. Every kid who's seen it has been fired up. So plan to bring a generous offering to get the project started and to make a commitment to the building fund over the next 12 months. Everybody does their part, and we'll knock it out. It's going to be fun. And you guys, I'm not worried at all about this service and your concrete and craziness. You're just, because you're right on the edge of crazy yourselves. So it's going to fit right in. So it's not going to make any difference. In this series, we are answering your questions about healing. And today we get to a topic that isn't discussed very often in church, mostly because we don't know what to say. Long-term illness. Several questions that were asked among many. How can I help or support someone through healing or through a lack of healing? I've been sick for years and the doctors don't know why. Is there any hope for me? Do you know someone who always seems to be sick? Maybe you even quietly question if it's in their head. You might even wonder what they did to cause it or deserve it. It's easy to be opinionated and judgmental when it's someone else. But when it's you, your opinion quickly changes. And all of a sudden, instead of judgment, it's sympathy. When you've been there, when you've suffered a long-term illness or one for which the doctors have no answer, you see things completely different. You may immediately identify with today's questions. If you or a family member has a disease for which there's no cure, you're facing a difficult prognosis, and the doctor said this is just part of your life. Or if you have a chronic condition that causes daily pain or discomfort, you do your best to learn to live with it, but you can't forget it. It's always there. Maybe you deal with depression, anxiety, or another type of condition. You've tried everything and nothing works. You're tired, frustrated, discouraged. Others of you have a sickness, disease, or pain, but can't find the cause. It's maddening. You have questions, but no answers. Maybe you're watching this message online, in the hospital or at home, and you feel hopeless, discouraged, and alone. Others of you aren't going to immediately identify. You're blessed. You've never faced that and hope you never will. I still want you to listen for several reasons. There may be someone in your family or circle of friends facing these challenges. You need to understand how to love, encourage, and pray for them. One day, you or someone you love might find yourself in the same situation, and what you learn today could be valuable in the future. And God will give you opportunities to share your faith and pray for people without answers. I want you to be ready to fulfill His purpose and plan. We're a family, the family of God. In Galatians chapter 6, Paul told us to carry each other's burdens. Romans 12 says, rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. We aren't supposed to let a brother or sister face a challenge alone. We are better and stronger together. Everything is better in teams. The story we look at today is found in Mark chapter 5. People had heard about Jesus, his teaching, his miracles. They came to see him, hear his teaching, and to have needs met. We pick it up in verse 22. One of the synagogue rulers named Jairus came there. Seeing Jesus, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please, come put your hands on her so she will be healed and live." Jairus was a synagogue leader, one of a group who opposed Jesus and his teaching. If the other leaders heard Jairus begging Jesus for help, he would lose his position and status. But Jairus decided to go to Jesus anyway because he only cared about one thing, his precious little girl. Jesus didn't hesitate. He'd come to bless and love everyone, even his enemies, so Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. It was a borderline mob scene. Jairus, Jesus, and the disciples could barely move because of all the people. They headed to Jairus' house, pushing their way through the crushing, clamoring crowd. And then the unthinkable happened. At the worst possible time for Jairus, Jesus was interrupted by a woman with a desperate need. A woman was there who'd been subject to bleeding for 12 years. 12 years is a long time. A lot can happen in 12 years. 12 years ago, the Dallas Mavericks won the NBA championship. Hallelujah. 12 years ago, no one had heard of COVID. 12 years ago, I had a kid in college and a kid finishing high school. Here's how long ago 12 years is. 12 years ago, the Razorbacks went to the Sugar Bowl under Coach Bobby Petrino. They were 11-2 that year. I'd seen only 12 years ago. 12 years ago, Pastor Parker and Tyler Jones looked a little different. This is them now. 12 years ago, the planking craze was a big deal. People were planking all over the place. It was just weird. 12 years ago, we didn't know what the fox said. One Direction was still together. Now they're multiple directions. 12 years ago, Mary Grace was 10 years old. 12 years seems like a lifetime. For 12 years, this woman had been losing blood, an abnormal female cycle that lasted 4,380 days. It was hard for her to remember when she wasn't sick, weak, or exhausted. She'd suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors, had spent all she had, but instead of getting better, she grew worse. Every day of every week, every month of every year, for 12 years, she suffered. Every new cure she tried ended up with her worse off than before. She had no hope. In addition to physical treatments, no doubt she'd received lots of advice. Everyone had an idea or a home remedy. You know how that is. One person tells you what kind of juice to drink. Another tells you what vitamin or supplement to take. Someone else suggests a new diet. Then there are the encouragers. One tells you their aunt had the same thing. Never got better. She just died. Another tells you you need to try positive confession. When you've struggled for a long time, you hear a lot of frustrating, irritating, and occasionally stupid suggestions from our encouragers who say things that aren't helpful in any way. The worst start with the words, "at least." People say, well, at least it's not terminal. Or at least you have insurance. Or at least your kids are grown. If you're talking with someone who's going through a difficult time, leave your at least statements out of the conversation. Quit trying to silver line someone else's cloud. Sometimes clouds are just clouds. To make it even worse, in those days, people believed the woman's condition was because of sin. There's still people who believe that way, and they say, well, if you just had more faith, you wouldn't be sick. If you hadn't done that, you wouldn't have this. Those people quickly change their theology when they get sick. February of 2012, I took a group of pastors to Africa. We had a great trip. We built valuable partnerships. Unfortunately, I get sick. The best guess is I picked up a parasite in my intestinal tract, not exactly the souvenir I had in mind. When I got home, I was still sick. My stomach felt like someone was pushing on it, like a fist in my stomach. If I ate much at all, it felt worse. For 3 or 4 months, I tried medicine, diet, everything my doctor could think of, nothing helped. I was losing weight, and I couldn't gain it back, no matter how hard I tried. A good friend of mine in our church is a nurse for a GI doctor. She got me to the doc. He's amazing. We tried any and every drug. I had every test imaginable. He consulted with other doctors. He read books. He asked countless questions. We talked and texted over the next few months as he searched for an answer, something to make me well. Several times we thought we had it figured out. I got better for 2 or 3 weeks and started gaining weight. And then without warning, it was back. Nothing worked, and no cure lasted. A full meal made me sick. I distinctly remember looking at a big juicy steak in my favorite restaurant and trying to decide, do I eat it and get sick, or do I just push it around my plate and pretend so no one notices? I pushed through physically. In 2 years, I only missed one function because I was sick. It was a banquet that I wasn't speaking at, just attending. I only told a few people, not because I didn't want prayer, but because I didn't want question when there weren't answers. I didn't even share with our team. Cindy, Tyler, Parker, a few trusted friends prayed for and with me, and I just kept losing weight. At the worst point, I lost 20 pounds. Some people made fun of me, told jokes about how thin I was. I tried to endure it quietly, even though I wondered why it was socially acceptable for them to make fun of me for being thin, but I couldn't say anything about them being grossly overweight. Many times I was greeted with, "You don't look good," or "You need to gain weight." That was encouraging. I knew I needed to gain weight. I knew I didn't look good. By the way, just an aside, "You don't look good." That's never a real encouraging way to greet somebody. "Hey, you don't look good." "Oh, thanks." "You don't either." "I'll get over it. You can't fix that." I never said that. I never did. And I won't say that tomorrow, trust me. But if you say, "You don't look good," or "You look sick," just know the person you're saying to it is not thankful or encouraged. I kept losing weight. At times I went 6 weeks without being able to eat a full meal. No matter what I tried, I couldn't put the weight back on or stay well. I was sick for 25 months, not 12 years, but it felt like forever. Back to the woman in the crowd, 12 years. One of the most painful consequences of her illness was the inability to be around other people. She was considered unclean. If she touched anyone, or they touched her, they became unclean. She couldn't go to the temple. She couldn't be around other women in the neighborhood. So she was not only sick, she was lonely. She'd heard rumors about Jesus. Jesus touched an unclean leper and made him clean, instantly healed. It was an amazing story. But after all she'd been through, the humiliation, the pain, the countless failed cures, she couldn't bring herself to believe it was true, especially the part about Jesus touching an unclean leper, because no one touched a leper. But what if it was true? What if Jesus' touch could heal her that quickly and that simply? Something happened and hope began to flicker in her heart. And then one day Jesus came to town. The woman watched the scene as she had many others for the last 12 years from the outside looking in. She wanted to be near Jesus, but it wasn't easy. People would recognize her and kick her out. And finally, she decided, what does it matter? I'm already miserable alone. So suddenly she realized she believed. Hope surged in her heart. Lowering her head with much difficulty, she began to make her way through the crowd to Jesus. And finally, she was close. He merely touched the leper, she told herself, and the leper was made clean. So she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I'll be healed. And with her last bit of strength, she crouched, she leaned forward, and her fingers brushed the hem of Jesus' robe. And suddenly she knew that something happened. Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from the suffering. The blood was no longer flowing. She was cured, instantly healed by the power of God. Jesus stopped walking, and the crowd came to a halt. He turned around and said, "Who touched my clothes?" Her heart began to beat rapid because she knew she was the one. Quaking with fear, she fell before Jesus, and she told the truth about herself and what she'd done. Jesus listened quietly, and when she'd finished speaking, his words settled her spirit. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. Be freed from your suffering." And that quick, that simple, she was healed of the disease and pronounced clean. She wasn't sure which meant more to her, the healing of her body or the healing that took place in her heart. Both would remain with her forever. She would never stop believing that Jesus could heal every illness, every disease, and every wounded heart that quickly and that simply. I believe she did two things. First, she went to the temple for the first time in 12 years. Second, I think she touched people. She hugged everyone she knew, everyone she didn't know, everyone she saw. It felt so good to touch again. The pain was gone. The suffering was over. She had been touched by Jesus, and she'd never be the same. The 2-year mark of my sickness, I made an appointment with the best infectious disease doctor in East Africa. It made sense. If I got sick in Africa, I could get well in Africa. My appointment was for Tuesday, February 4th, 2014. Almost exactly 2 years after I got sick. And then 2 days before I was scheduled to leave, a crisis forced me to cancel my trip to Africa and the doctor's appointment. I was crushed, and the sickness continued. On March 17th, 2014, the doctor started me on a new medicine, and after 3 days, I ate a full meal. I'd had short-term answers before, but I was hopeful. And this time it lasted. After 743 days of being sick, I started gaining weight again. It was a slow process as I regained my appetite and trusted I could actually eat. Today, almost 9 years later, I still struggle to keep my weight up. It's an everyday battle. But I can eat without being gripped by terror. In fact, last month, Parker and I split a huge meal at Cypress Social. And we ate every last bit of that tray. You could give the credit to the doctor or credit to the drug. But after 25 months and 13 days of being sick, countless different medicines, I give and I gave all the glory to Jesus. He touched me. See, if you didn't walk that with me, you don't understand when I celebrate when I can eat a whole cookie or a chocolate or a steak. What's normal to you is exceptional for me. Every time, I'm thankful for his healing touch. If I could live it all over again, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. but I'm thankful to God for allowing me to learn through the storm. See, there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is, I feel compassion towards you. Empathy is, I know what you're going through. I understand your feelings. You feel empathy when you've been there and sympathy when you haven't. I've always had sympathy for people who were sick. Now I have empathy for people with no answers. I listen differently. I pray differently. I respond differently. I'm a better person. I'm a better pastor. So let me help you with some tips here. Here's how you can talk to and express care for someone in a long-term battle. Number one, pray for them. During worship, if the Lord impresses on your heart, walk over, put a hand on their shoulder and pray. You don't have to say anything, just pray. Every time they stand or they come forward for prayer, join them. Your prayers are encouraging. I'll never forget one Sunday night when I was at my most discouraged. My younger son, Parker, prayed for me. Right there, I can take you to the exact spot. And I put my head on his chest and I just wept. And it felt so good as Parker prayed for me. You say, but I don't know what to say when I pray. You don't have to pray fancy words. The important thing is that you're there, that you're standing with them. Second way to help, tell them I'm praying for you. Send a note, an email, a Facebook message, a text, a card. Your simple gesture reminds your friend she's not alone. Through my sickness, 2 of our board members texted or emailed me regularly, telling me they were praying. Third thing, express your love. Hug them. Tell them I love you. Don't treat someone with a disease, depression, or an undiagnosed illness like they're unclean. Don't let discomfort keep you from caring. Push past that and express love. Cry when they cry. Laugh when they laugh. Don't try to stop them from crying and don't make them feel bad for laughing. Crying and laughing through the difficulties of life is what friends are for. Fourth, remember the family of the person with a long-term illness. They're also in the fight. It can be incredibly discouraging and sap their strength physically, mentally, emotionally. The same things you say to the sick person, say to them. If you're in that situation, if you're caring for someone, I want you to know we love you. We don't always know what to say, but we're with you. We're not only praying for your family member, we're praying for you. Now, here's some things not to do. Don't use humor to encourage. When you're facing a long-term illness, it's not very funny. Funny insults aren't funny. They hurt. I still remember a guy. I was in this hallway. I'd call his name, but I won't. And he yelled at me and chased me down to insult me. Anytime your idea of humor is to make fun of someone else's physical appearance or condition, you are hurting, not helping. We need to completely eliminate that kind of insensitive humor from our culture. Why would you think that makes sense? If the person is sick, uses humor, follow their lead, join their laughter. But don't you ever lead with laughter. You lead with love. Here's another thing not to say. Don't say, let me know if there's anything I can do to help, unless you actually mean it. If you offer help, then when they ask it, change your schedule and actually help. Actually do it. Don't constantly ask how they're doing. Don't pretend to be a medical expert unless you went to medical school. Please don't Google their symptoms and offer your diagnoses. Don't offer solutions that benefit you. Don't try to sell them products or miracle cures so you can line your pockets with their sickness. Don't tell them about everyone you know who died from the same thing. Now let me go back to Jairus' story that was interrupted by that woman. Well, Jesus was still speaking. Some men came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue ruler. They said, your daughter's dead. Too late. Why bother the teacher anymore? Ignoring what they said, Jesus told Jairus, don't be afraid, just believe. Jesus led Jairus to his home. When they arrived, they heard the wailing of mourners. Jairus silently repeated Jesus' instructions over and over. Just believe, just believe. He wanted to believe. But the wailing of the mourners told him there was no hope. His daughter was dead. Jairus' wife stood in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. Jesus went in the house with Peter, James, Jairus, and his wife. There was weeping and wailing. And Jesus asked, "What's all the commotion, the wailing? What's this about? Be quiet. The girl's not dead. She's just asleep." The mourners were so shocked, they forgot to mourn. They laughed at him. To them, Jesus was a fool. The child's asleep. Who is he? What's he thinking? Jesus kicked them out. Now there's no one in the house except Jesus, Jairus, Mrs. Jairus, and the 12-year-old girl. Jesus led them into the room where the child lay. She appeared peaceful and beautiful, as if she were sweetly dreaming, but her chest didn't rise, and no sound was heard. She didn't stir. Jesus went to her bedside. He knelt down. He took her tiny little hand in his, and he said, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." And she stood up, and she walked around. Can you imagine the scene? The mother and father fell to their knees, praising God and thanking Jesus. They hugged their daughter, and they cried tears of joy. It was a beautiful reunion that any parent can identify with. Jairus no longer had any questions about Jesus. And no doubt Jairus and his entire family became lifelong followers. Wouldn't you like to have been there when they walked outside the house holding their daughter by the hand and said to everyone who just made fun and laughed and said, "Guess she was just asleep"? If you're in a long-term battle, here's what you can learn from the story. Number one, don't let anything keep you from Jesus. Jairus had to overcome his peers, his belief system, and his fears, but he did. He risked it all, and he ran to Jesus. The woman had to overcome her shame, her disappointment, her discouragement, and the disapproval of others. She overcame it all and ran to Jesus. Don't let anything keep you from Jesus. I know you have doubts. So did Jairus. So did the woman who'd been sick for 12 years. Don't let doubts keep you from Jesus. When you struggle with doubt and you wonder if there's ever going to be an answer, if the battle seems endless and you're not even sure your prayers are heard, God has not forgotten you. You can trust him. You're worried what other people will think. Will people wonder why you haven't been healed? Will people wonder why you keep going forward for prayer? Don't let others keep you from Jesus. When I was sick, I had those thoughts. And if you wonder why I'm fighting a little emotion tonight, it's because just a whole lot of memories fled back telling the story again. I had all the thoughts, what will people think if the pastor keeps going for prayer? How can I pray for people when I'm not healed? I decided I needed a touch from God more than I feared the criticism of judgmental people or the question of skeptics. I can't tell you how many times I came forward for prayer. Push through the crowd and push past your pride. Don't let anything keep you from Jesus. Maybe you feel forgotten. You've seen other people healed and blessed, and your thought has been, God, what about me? God hadn't forgotten you. He knows right where you are and precisely what you need. I don't know how long it's been, but today might be your day. I want to share a song with you that really ministered to me during my battle. Preparing for this message, I started crying, pulled it up and listened to the song again, crying, remembering how much it meant to me in that long, frustrating period of my life. I must have listened to this song and sang it 1,000 times in my 743 days.
It's not what I prayed for, it's not what I wanted, it's not something I understand. And my circumstances seem so confusing. I'm placing it all in your hands. Your ways are higher than mine. I want mountains to move, you want me to climb. So I'm gonna trust in your work, your will and your time. Your ways are higher than mine. One day I'm sure I will look back and marvel at how you knew best all along. And you see from heaven, you know it's the hard times that make my faith steady and strong. Your ways are higher than mine. I want mountains to move, and you want me to climb. So I'm gonna trust in your work, your will and your time. Your ways are higher than mine. And when I start to doubt, help me believe somewhere so far above me. Your ways are higher than mine. I want mountains to move, but you want me to climb. So I'm gonna trust in your work, your will and your time. Oh, your ways are so much higher than mine. Your ways are higher than mine.